What is going on there, gunfighters? Saddle up, gird your loins for another episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting tactics, ballistics, philosophy, believe it or not, on gunfighting. The right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you as host. I'm going to throw in a quick rapid-fire bio. We'll get into this topic about be careful. How do we properly apply military and police thought, tactics, gear to our situation? How do we do that circumspectly, properly? That's what we're going to talk about today. Blessed to have served in military, law enforcement, combat veteran, private contractor, competition shooter, lifelong hunter, guide. Blessed by God that He got me through all those things so I could share this firsthand training, knowledge, experience with you to serve you today. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Psalm 144. Now, you'll gather from that bio, I have a military law enforcement background, among other things. There's some good lessons we can learn. Be careful thinking that everything applies to you. The first common misconception I think that many veterans will laugh at is the term mil-spec, and people throw it on all kinds of stuff. Sprinkle some mil-spec on it. It's kind of like at the grocery store. Put organic on it, people will think it's healthy. Put low fat on an Oreo, people will think it's healthy. Put mil-spec on this gear and people will think it's good. Mil-spec, military specification, does not mean that something is good, or good for you, or good for your situation, or even good in general. It means that it was meant, probably the cheapest bidder, to meet criteria set forth by that military contract. That's it. It may mean that the item is durable if durability was written into the spec. I'll give you that. A lot of military packs, military gear, web gear, LBV, stuff like that, they are meant to take a lot of abuse. It doesn't make them good. Like, an LBV is not a bad piece of kit, load-bearing vest. For those of you not hip with the military vernacular, a load-bearing vest, a military load-bearing vest. It's not a bad piece of kit, but likely you could find a civilian turkey hunting vest that's much better for most things. The fact that it's mil-spec does not mean that it's good. Sometimes mil-spec stuff is good. Sometimes it is not good, and not good for your situation. So, take the term mil-spec with a grain of salt. First of all, do you even know what the military specification was? Thinking a piece of mil-spec gear is good makes no more sense than thinking that a low-fat Oreo is healthy. What does that even mean? Mil-spec. So just, if you get all excited when you see mil-spec, just take it with a grain of salt is all I'm saying. It doesn't make it bad, but it certainly doesn't make it good either. Here's a big one. Military ammo. If the military uses it, it has to be good. Does it? Does it really? What specifications was it made for? Let's talk about green tip for a minute. Just a case in point. Green tip is kind of garbage ammo for civilians for most things. You as a civilian can get way better ammo for most defensive situations. Period. Than green tip. Green tip is not a good ballistic performer. Green tip is a mild barrier penetrator. Does that even apply to you? Do you want that, or do you want the opposite of that? In all my kit, my loadout, I generally, if I'm taking an AR as a truck gun, which sometimes I do if I get into a people high-V area, it's common for me to have one magazine of green tip. Not my magazine that's in the gun, but I like to have the option if I want to penetrate. But it's a good option if I want to penetrate some stuff. When I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area, same thing. I would similarly have, if I was taking an AR for that mission, sometimes I would take the SCAR 17, the SCAR Heavy. But, if I was going to take an AR, I would often have a magazine of green tip because I was there to stop mostly active shooters, but mass violence comes in many forms, and one of those many forms is vehicle rammings, mass killings with vehicles. A vehicle is a deadly weapon, deadlier than most small arms, most rifles, handguns, shotguns. Like that or not, politicians, that's just a fact. Somebody can do just as much damage with a pickup truck in a large crowd of people as they can with a weapon usually, because it is in fact is a several thousand-pound weapon. If I'm trying to stop a vehicle, yeah, some kind of light barrier penetration is a benefit. But again, that's an outlier. For the vast majority of other things, there's way better ammo, right? For my 223, for my 5.56. Give me Spear Gold Dot, 55 grain. Give me Federal True Tactical Rifle Urban. Yes, please. I will take that all day long over Green Tip. Green Tip is not very accurate. It is not great ballistically. It's okay for, again, barrier penetration, but if that doesn't apply to you, you can get a much better terminal performance round than that. So don't think, oh, the military uses it, it must be good. The military uses it because that's what it was spec'd out for, and that's not even what the U.S. chose. That's what NATO chose, if you look at your history on the M855, the Green Tip. NATO wanted that. America never even wanted that round. We kind of got stuck with it because NATO voted it in. So, you know, chew on that. And it's not very accurate, and it's not great ballistically for most things other than light barrier penetration. Another one, the 124 grain NATO 9mm ammo. Ugh. Just, no. Unless you get a really good deal on it and you're using it as range fodder. You're using it as steel target fodder. You're going to practice at the range with it. For that, it's okay. Again, the cheapest bidder. A lot of the mil-spec stuff is the cheapest bidder. And although we didn't sign the Hague Convention of 1890-something, a lot of NATO countries did, and we're part of NATO again. So you'll see some of the new military spec ammo is actually good performing, expanding 9mm ammo. But a lot of that is that 124 grain NATO ball ammunition. It's not good ammunition for you, for most things. Again, other than for range fodder. It's okay for range fodder, and it's okay if you're a prepper and you're into long-term storage, because it tends to be water sealed and watertight. That's one of the specifications. But that doesn't make it great ammo. So that's just two things on the ammo. The other one, we talked thus far about military, but law enforcement. I've heard this advice, and I would just say that I differ from this advice. Carry what your local PD carries as far as defensive handgun ammo. I would say there's a lot of caveats in there. One caveat, again, cheapest bidder. Do you want to trust your life to the cheapest bidder? A lot of times, the people in any organization, if you look up the iron law of bureaucracy, the people that rise to the top aren't generally people still doing the job out on the streets. That may differ in some departments, but in many departments, especially big departments, the people doing the budget stuff, largely bureaucrats. They're going to buy whatever ammo they can save money on sometimes, unless that person happens to be a ballistics person. That is possible, and I've seen that because I've been that for when I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. I spared no expense when it came to defensive fighting ammunition. But that's not always the case. I've worked for enough different places to know that. So, again, cheapest bidder. That's one thing. Did the local department, whatever jurisdiction you're under, did they do their due diligence to make sure that their ammunition was a good choice? That's a maybe. That's a big maybe. So are you trusting your life to what somebody else just bought randomly? And let's say they did do their due diligence. Let's say for them, for their duty gun, it is the best choice. Now, if you've listened for any length of time, you'll know that I am a big proponent of carry a full-size fighting handgun day to day as your carry gun. A full-size fighting handgun. Pick your flavor. I'm not here to argue about Glock versus M&P versus 1911, but a full-size fighting handgun for so many reasons. But one is this, and this applies to what I'm talking about here, carrying what your general PD carries. Generally, your police department, your sheriff's department, your whomever in your municipality is going to carry a full-size fighting handgun. Hollow points are velocity-based. If you don't believe me, take a hollow point out of your magazine and drop it on the floor and see if it expands. It will not. it needs a certain threshold of velocity. As far as practical handguns go, the longer the barrel, the faster that projectile, even in the same caliber. It doesn't matter what it says on the box, okay? The box numbers are generally pretty optimistic, and they're generally going to be for a full-length handgun. If you're shooting it out of what most people carry, a little micro 9, a hashtag Me Too gun. I have a gun, look at me. Not an actual fighting handgun. Your velocities are going to be far less. So although that, even if they did their due diligence, and even if that round expands very well out of their handgun, that doesn't mean it's going to do well at all out of your micro 9, if that's in fact what you carry. Now, if they did their due diligence and they carry a Glock 17 and you carry a Glock 17, rock on. Then that's decent advice. But I'd say in the majority of cases, it's probably not good advice. Maybe it still is good ammo. Maybe that ammunition will expand well out of their barrel length and your barrel length. But it's not a given. Don't trust your life to something unproven. So be wary of taking what law enforcement does and applying it to you. The next one, this is going to ruffle some feathers. This is going to pee in some Cheerios. But just stop. Stop trying to make the AR-15 the ultimate survival rifle. I've got a lot of time behind an AR-15. Military, law enforcement, special assignments, private contracting. As an instructor for the federal government, that I'm not going to specify exactly who or whom, I got a lot of trigger time behind an AR-15. A lot more than most in a lot of different roles. There's some people out there, I'm sure, that have more trigger time than me. Not to mention competition shooting. And not to mention even hunting. But stop trying to say it's a great choice for a survival rifle. I think people that do that are because that's what they only have experience in. If you broaden your horizons, I think if you're being honest, you will realize it is not a good choice. The AR-15 is largely a one-trick pony. It is not a broad-spectrum survival rifle. It is a decent, perhaps even the best, modern urban warfare battlefield rifle that we have in large quantities, mass issued today. Are you on a battlefield? It is also a very good varmint combination, as it was developed from a very good varmint caliber, the 222 Remington, which became the 223 Remington. It's great for varmints. I've said I've hunted with it. It is really good for prairie dogs. It is really good for whistle pigs. It is really good for coyote. Okay, so maybe you have a two-trick pony. It's not a great broad-spectrum rifle. 223 is not a great broad-spectrum round. The AR-15 is not a great all-around survival rifle design, in my opinion. I have had catastrophic failures with that gun, and I've seen others with mil-spec, which actually are pretty durable, good. M16, M4s. I had a catastrophic failure with my M16 during the war. I don't mean like a double feed, a triple feed, even a bolt override. I mean catastrophic, meaning it could not be fixed by the end user in the field. Thankfully, we fight in teams, fire teams, squads. Is that going to apply to you for your survival rifle? What are you trying to do with your survival rifle? And nobody knows, right? Nobody sees the future. I'm not a false prophet. I'm not pretending to see the future. Are you expecting Red Dawn running around peeing in radiators fighting Russian paratroopers on a giant real-life risk arena? Then okay, then I would submit that's not a bad choice. But if you're looking for an all-around survival rifle, I would submit there's probably a dozen better choices I would pick than any variant of the AR-15 M16. If you don't count like AR-10s as a variant, I would say that's a different thing. I would say those would be better as a broad-spectrum rifle than an AR-15. But just stop trying to pretend. If you think that it is for you and you live in a people hive east of the Mississippi, you think it's going to be, cannibalistic, fighting Russian paratroopers, battlefield, then okay. If that's what you think that the end of the world is going to be like, I don't see the future. Then an AR-15 is not a bad choice. But stop pretending it's a great all-around broad-spectrum survival rifle. If that's what you choose for your one long gun for the apocalypse, go ahead. But I would be careful. Just because it's not a bad tool for U.S. infantry, U.S. Marine Corps infantry, U.S. Army infantry, of which I served in both. I was it 0351 Assaultman, which no longer exists in the Marine Corps. Maybe it was, politically incorrect or something. I don't know why they got rid of it. I was also held the MOS of 11 Bravo in the U.S. Army. So it's not a bad rifle for that. It has issues, for sure. But I would not call it a great broad spectrum survival rifle. And I think a lot of people that do, I think it's because they have this nostalgia. And nostalgia can be a deadly drug. They served in the military, or they really look up to somebody that was a veteran or is a veteran that served in the military, law enforcement, and they have all their experience, or the vast majority of their experience, with an AR-15. So they think it's a good rifle for a lot of things that it's not. So I'm not saying it's a bad weapons platform, and it's certainly good in its niches. But I consider it a niche weapon, not a broad spectrum survival rifle. My opinion, again, ruffle some feathers, feel free to disagree. Another one, you see a lot of this, like, what's the military loadout for X? What's the military loadout for infantry? What's the military loadout for a Cav Scout? What's the military loadout for a forward observer? And I'm not saying you can't learn a lot from those things. I'm a Marine Corps infantry combat veteran. Also was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I get it. You can learn some lessons from that. And I certainly learned some lessons from my time in combat. Mostly the reality that war is a horrible, horrible, disgusting, nasty things, and bad things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, and it's just a horrible, horrible thing to experience. Some of the stuff you can learn from those loadouts, though, apply to you and some don't. Here's the main difference. As U.S. Marine Corps infantry, or whomever generally in the U.S. military, you have an entire logistics train supporting you. Even the U.S. Marine Corps, which is really infantry heavy compared to most forces, you have a lot of support personnel, a lot of logistics personnel supporting that infantryman. Does that apply to you? Are you the gunfighter rifleman out there, and then you have an entire team supporting you with gear, running up gear to you in the field? If that doesn't apply to you, then that loadout, a lot of it, at least in the proper ratios, does not apply to you. Now, some of it will. Is it good to have a good lens added compass? Check. Is it good to have extra socks? Check. But an infantryman, we might carry 3 MREs, field stripped down. That's fine for an infantryman, because we have a supply chain, and Army marches on its stomach. But unless you got somebody airdropping you supplies, you probably should redistribute your pack and have a lot more of it in calories. Right? Do you have somebody dropping off water buffaloes? And I don't mean the animal. I mean, if you don't know what that is, it's a giant tank. It's a giant metal tank of potable water, staged at strategic locations. Do you have that? You know that a major killer in a lot of war and other natural disasters is dirty water. A lot of times in war and major disasters and things like that, the grid goes down, which means a lot of times clean water goes down. It also means that where people go to the bathroom normally changes. And think about that and how it applies to water. It's not unheard of for the amount of people dying from drinking dirty water after a disaster to surmount the number that died from the actual disaster. So again, unless you have a strategic supply train dropping you off water buffaloes in different locations within a few hours force march with your battle loadout, probably want to be more water heavy than what the infantryman carries. I don't mean a life straw. I've used life straws quite a bit, probably more than most people. Life straws are okay in an emergency, like short term, but that better be your secondary job. That better be your part-time job, trying to suck enough water out of a life straw to get enough water to drink if you're marching doing physical activity. It is not a good solution. There are much better solutions. So if you think that, I've got my bug out bag and I've got a life straw, check, I'm good to go. Have you actually gone and spent time out in the bush living off grid, just getting water out of your life straw? Because if you do, as I did, because I've firsthand experience, might want to rethink that. Maybe that should be a backup or a tertiary water thing. Break glass in case of emergency instead of your primary getting clean water source. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, your priorities are probably not the same as a Marine Corps infantryman or an Army infantryman or a Cav Scout or whomever, or a Navy SEAL. I take nothing away from the Navy SEALs, but Navy SEAls are supported by all kinds of things. A lot of times air support. You probably don't have air support. I don't have air support. They have people gathering and feeding them intelligence. The whole big chunk of the military is intelligence. Do you have really good professional people feeding you intelligence? So don't assume that everything applies to you. Now, some of it might. We can learn a lot of lessons from professionals in these areas, but make sure that you don't just take it carte blanche. No questions asked. Like, this is a Marine Corps infantryman's loadout. Well, I'm going to do exactly that, and that's going to be exactly right for me. Is it, though? Anyway, something to think about. All right, let me ruffle some more feathers. Glock is a good gun because a lot of professionals use it. Military, law enforcement. Therefore, it's a good gun. A lot of those so-called professionals are professionals where carrying a handgun is not their primary responsibility. Usually in a military role, a handgun is a secondary. I speak from experience. Nobody sends their frontline infantry equipped primarily being the key word, with a handgun. A lot of times this is a civilian, and I've done a whole episode on this philosophy. A handgun is your primary, because a handgun is what you have to fight with most of the time. Hopefully you carry a gun if you're listening to this podcast. Anyway, carry a handgun as a man. Come on. If you're able and willing to, you're not a pacifist, which you're probably not if you're listening to this, just carry a gun. But it's different for you. A handgun is probably your primary. It's probably what you have the vast majority of times to fight with. It's a big reason I went from precision rifle competition shooting a long time ago to practical handgun competition, because I thought if I got in a fight for my life outside of my military time, it was probably going to be with a handgun. And it's probably going to be a handgun for you. Getting back to Glock. A lot of military use it because they need a fire extinguisher going to break glass in case of emergency. It's not their primary fighting tool. It's an emergency tool. Also, I've said this many times, and it probably doesn't make me a lot of friends, but cops are not gunfighters. As somebody that's been a cop. Some cops are gunfighters. Some cops work specialized assignments, and a big chunk of their bread and butter they do day to day is shooting, firearms training. A lot of cops are not. A lot of cops mostly are administrators. They're clerks. You want an example of this? Go ask any cop that you know that works regular assignments, which is a hard job. It's a very hard job. That's not my point. But go ask any beat cop, any patrol cop. How much time do you spend pulling a trigger, even in training, and how much time do you spend with a pen in your hand or behind a keyboard? Go ahead. You can pause the podcast right here. Go ask some of them and come back to me. They spend way more time as a clerk, as an administrator, documenting things than they ever do pulling a trigger. They're not gunfighters. They have it for a similar reason. Fire extinguisher, break glass in case of emergency. And remember how I said a lot of people in organizations that are procuring stuff are doing it based on price, based on a price point. I will criticize Glocks for a lot of things, but I'll give them credit where credit is due. They're very durable, reliable guns, which plays into this a little bit, but they're also genius in marketing. They know that if a lot of cops carry Glocks, a lot of other people will think they're good guns. Whether they are or not, I'm not here to dispute that. That's genius marketing. So you can even look up the prices for the Glock Blue Label program, which is cool that they do that. But look at the price of a Glock for a single law enforcement officer. Last I checked, which was like last week, it was like $300 and something for a brand new Gen 5 Glock for a single law enforcement officer. Now, what if it's an organization like I used to work for, LAPD, that when I was there had 9,000 officers? It may be more now, but they had 9,000 officers. What do you think the price is for 9,000 of those? Because economy of scale, you buy in bulk, you save money. Kind of like Costco versus the gas station. What do you pay for a bottle of water when you buy it in a crate at Costco versus buying it one bottle at a time at a gas station? Right? What do you think their price is when they buy 9,000 Glocks at a time or whatever? And look at how many sworn peace officers are in the entire country. and they don't all carry Glocks, but a lot of them do. That's a very small chunk of the U.S. population and a very small chunk of total handguns sold every year. I will criticize Glocks for a lot of things. They are very durable. They will tend to go bang and throw lead somewhere in the general direction you want it to. And they are genius marketers. That doesn't mean it's a good choice for you, and that doesn't mean that the cop carries it because it's the best gun for him. I'm not telling you not to carry a Glock. If you like Glock and you want Glock, and you want to rock a Glock, then go for it. But do it based on actual training and experience. I'll be honest, there are some places and some environments where if I was getting sent to those as a professional gunfighter, I would choose a Glock. They're not the majority, though. Just keep that in mind. Are you choosing a Glock because it's actually a good choice for you, or because John Smith badge holder carries a Glock? And again, I'm not saying a Glock is a bad gun. I'm just saying, are you choosing it for the right reasons, or are you choosing it because it's some situation that somebody else has that does not apply to you? Now, I'm going to end this on a positive spin here. There's a lot that we can learn and glean from military and law enforcement. Physical standards. The military has, some law enforcement agencies don't have. But physical standards. You look at one commonality of all great warriors throughout history. I don't care if it was the Zulu. I don't care if it was the samurai. I don't care if it was the Crusaders. Physical fitness is important. I don't care whether you're fighting with a Glock or with a rock. Physical fitness is important. It's also really important for stress management. Also, qualifications, right? We love to in the 2A community, shall not be infringed, man. Correct. Check. But what does the Second Amendment say? A well-regulated militia. And that doesn't mean restricted. It means well-regulated as in well-trained. Are you well-regulated? Or are you just a dude with a bunch of cool guns? Because that's not well-regulated. That's well-armed. It's not well-regulated. With that right should come that responsibility. Be well-regulated. I'm a big proponent of you as a civilian shooting some kind of qualification. Not even that they're great qualifications, but they're good, and they'll probably force you to practice some things you don't normally practice. And although they're not the best, a lot of law enforcement qualifications are a good place to start, and it's a good thing to hold yourself to a standard. Even if the standard is low, as a lot of law enforcement qualifications I would say are, they're still better than you not having any standard at all and thinking, oh, I've got an LCP. I can hit a silhouette at 3 yards. I'm a gunfighter. I'm proficient. I'm well-regulated. Are you, though? So, shooting a qualification, having a standard, that's something that we can really learn and hold ourselves to, I think, as well-armed, well-regulated citizens. So maybe we should look at that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I asked a while ago different categories you guys wanted, and you guys wanted more philosophy. So thanks for philosophizing with me today. I appreciate you guys. If you appreciate me, it's often, I think, a ridiculous quote that money makes the world go round. Money does not make the world go round. Almighty God, the creator and sustainer of the universe, makes the world go round. Not money. But it does take money, or at least that's generally the easiest medium of exchange today, to get things like gasoline, ammunition, gunpowder, microphones, equipment, paying for internet so that I can actually get these podcasts out to you guys. If it were up to me, I might just be a hermit up in the hills. You guys don't know, I already live semi-off-grid nomadically. I might be fully off-grid if it wasn't for me doing the podcast. Like I'm here to serve you guys. I don't do this podcast primarily to serve me. I do it to serve you guys. And for a long time, it just cost me money. But if you want the amount of content that you get, it requires some kind of money. And I don't like that, but that's the way that it is. I'm actually pretty bad at marketing and other stuff, if I'm being honest. But if you want to support the podcast, if you appreciate this content and you want to support, consider becoming a patron. Mostly do it because you want to support the podcast, but also patrons get a lot of cool insider-only content. They get a lot of episodes that you're just not going to get. You're going to miss out on because you're not a patron. And a lot of times I'll talk about stuff on there that I won't talk about on here. So if that intrigues you, consider becoming a patron. You can always cancel if you don't like it, but there should be a Patreon link in the show notes. With that, your tactical tip of the day. Now, I mentioned that I don't think the AR-15 and 223 is the best all-around survival rifle, and I've been a professional big game hunter and guide. I don't think it's a great deer rifle. I will concede that you can kill deer with it. Tactical tip, if you're going to do that, really look at solid copper projectiles for your 223. They really kind of punch above their weight class for caliber. They're not just for hippies in Birkenstocks in California. Solid copper ammo, yes, it might be greener, but that doesn't mean that it's not better. It's not always better, but in this situation where you're trying to press the 223 5.56 into a roll it was never intended for, I think you might find some distinct advantage if you're going to hunt deer-sized game with a 223 at looking at the solid copper monolithic bullets. Kind of the, and I get no sponsors here, I take no sponsors. You shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. I guess we'll make that the tactical verse of the day. But Barnes TSX, TTSX, I think is what they're on now. That's kind of the standard for solid copper projectiles. There's some other good ones out there, but you might start looking there, and if you find another reason, look at and always test it out through your gun, point of aim, point of impact, terminal performance. But Barnes TSX, TTSX, they've got quite a few loads available or listed in 223. And again, the verse of the day, you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.